Anushka.
And this is Sanchi.
Today we're going to talk about the case Wilkinson versus Downtown, where we'll talk about nervous shock and how physical harm as well as mental illness and psychiatric harm are protected by law.
And now let's move forward to the theory.
The contents that we will be talking about are the facts of the case, legal issue, judgment, and in the end, we'll explain the principle.
Starting with the facts of the case, the parties involved in this case are Mrs. Wilkinson, Mr. Thomas Wilkinson, Mr. Downtown, who was a regular customer at Wilkinson's pub. This is how the story goes like, and we will understand it through an animated video for more clarity.
This is Thomas Wilkinson. He was the landlord of Albion Public House in London. He owned a pub. His wife is Miss Lavinia Wilkinson. On one fine day, April 9th, 1896, Mrs. Wilkinson was working at a pub while Mr. Wilkinson was away at the races at Harlow. That evening, Mr. Downtown, who was a regular customer there, entered the Albion Public House, where he was well acquainted with the landlord, Thomas Wilkinson, and his wife. Mr. Downton, who had attended the same event, approached Mrs. Wilkinson and delivered a shocking message. He claimed her husband met with a serious accident while returning home by wagonette, breaking both his legs, and was lying injured at the Elms in Leytonstone. Alarmed by the news, Mrs. Wilkinson immediately sent her son and a servant to Leytonstone to assist her supposedly injured husband. When the family members arrived at the location, they learned that Mr. Downtown's story was entirely a practical joke. Mr. Wilkinson was unharmed and later arrived home safely as planned. The emotional shock of the false message caused Mrs. Wilkinson severe illness and distress. Her life was in danger due to the trauma.
Legal issue presented in this case is, can damages for psychiatric harm be recovered where the defendant intends to inflict such distress? Few more issues that were presented are, first, whether the defendant's false statement made as a practical joke constitute a legal wrong giving rise to a liability for the plaintiff's physical and nervous injury. Second, whether damages for illness caused by mental shock resulting from a false statement are recoverable under the established tort principles. Third, whether the defendant's act was willful and intended or calculated to cause physical harm to the plaintiff. Fourth, whether the physical harm suffered by the plaintiff was too remote a consequence to warrant legal redress. Mrs. Wilkinson and her husband filed a lawsuit arguing that Downtown's false statement was intended to aggrieve and injure directly, resulting in her mental anguish and physical illness. The plaintiff, Mrs. Wilkinson, argued entitlement to recover damages as the injury was caused by defendant's fraud, relying on the doctrine established in Paisley v. Freeman and Langridge v. Levy. The false statement was intended to be acted upon, causing damage naturally resulting from that reliance. The defendant, Mr. Downton, argued that the conduct was a practical joke without malicious intent to cause harm. The resulting injury was either not intended or was too remote to be legally attributable.
The case of Wilkinson versus Downton was heard in the High Court in England, with a common jury assisting the judge, Mr. Wright. The High Court held Mr. Downton liable for the harm caused by his false statement that Mrs. Wilkinson's husband had been seriously injured. Downton was found to have willfully done an act calculated to cause physical harm, thereby infringing Mrs. Wilkinson's legal right to personal safety and causing her actual physical harm via severe shock and illness. The court rejected Downton's defenses that he was merely joking and that the damages was too remote, finding that the intent to cause the effect or similar harm could be attributed to him, as his statement was expected to seriously affect almost anyone. Damages were awarded for both the unnecessary journey and the physical and mental shock suffered. The case established a new tort principle that a person can be liable if they willfully perform an act calculated to cause physical harm, even if there was no direct malicious intent. This judgment paved the way for recognizing liability for intentional infliction of mental distress resulting in physical harm, significantly influencing tort law both in England and internationally. This case established a principle that a tort where a person is liable, they willfully do an act calculated to cause physical harm, and that the harm actually results. The liability arises if the defendant did not intend the exact harm caused, as long as the act was deliberate or reckless, and likely to cause such harm. The harm must be physical or recognized psychiatric injury, not just emotional distress. The defendant cannot avoid liability by claiming the harm was unexpected or greater than intended. This principle protects personal safety from intentional acts causing psychological or physical injury without lawful excuse. It created a foundation for claims of intentional infliction of mental shock beyond traditional torts like negligence or trespass to the person.
Was the whole story about the Wilkinson versus Downton. We explained the facts, the issues, judgment, as well as the legal principles on this case. Thank you for watching our deep dive into the Wilkinson versus Downton. What questions or thoughts? Drop them in the comments below. We would love to hear from you.
Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.